In this lesson, we'll learn how to use content-aware fill to remove distracting elements from some images. So towards the end of the previous lesson, we were using the healing brush to remove those power lines that were swooping across the sky here on this image. And we used that aligned option to make that just a little bit more manageable so that we weren't having to sample as frequently as we started to heal out and work our way down each one of those power lines. So that was my task to you in between lessons, is to kind of continue on removing the remaining parts of those power lines. Again, we were working on a separate layer, working non-destructively, and as we use content-aware fill, we want to continue on attempting to work as non-destructively as possible. So this image would be a really peaceful shot of nature if not for that really large power line tower sticking up here in the background, really messing up our composition. So there's a number of different ways that we could really attempt to remove this power line tower. You could try using your healing brush to try and heal it out. The problem is you're going to start to get some muddiness here, creating just more problems for you to deal with. This would most certainly be the case if you tried to use a spot healing brush. You could try using the clone stamp, which is another healing tool we'll talk about later on, but that could get really tedious and perhaps a little bit of problematic issue just as you get down here where you have some other background trees and so forth. So the easiest way, I think, would be to use content-aware fill. So the way that works is we would grab our lasso tool and we would basically draw a selection around whatever element it is we're wanting to remove from an image. And as I draw the selection, I try to give a little bit of breathing room around this tower, for example, and that'll really help the content-aware feature fill that in seamlessly. And what it's going to do is look at the surrounding area around the selection to fill it in with content that it basically exists, relatable content that exists surrounding the selection. Okay, now we want to work non-destructively, right? Well, with content-aware fill, we're not going to have any kind of option to sample across different layers like we did with the healing and spot healing brush. So we are going to have to work on the actual original image in this case. And so with that said, what I want to go ahead and do is hit Control-C. I want to copy basically all the pixels within this selection, and then I'm going to paste it back in here in a moment on a separate layer, just so we can maintain all the original aspects of this image. So what I want to go ahead and do now is bring up our fill dialog so that we can use the content-aware feature of that dialog. So you could go to Edit, choose Fill, or you could hit Shift F5 on your keyboard, or if you still have the lasso tool selected, just right-click within the selection and choose Fill. So just a few different ways to bring up this dialog. You see where it says Use under Contents in this Fill dialog? Make sure it's set to Content Aware and not something like, say, foreground color. If that was the case, you'd be filling in the selection with whatever foreground color you have chosen over here in your tool panel. So make sure it says Content Aware. And then for this demonstration, just make sure you have the blend mode set to normal and opacity at 100% and click OK. All right, so it actually did a really nice job. I'm going to hit Control-H to temporarily hide our selection. And you can see there, it worked out really nicely. We have a few little areas right here. You can see that little phone line kind of got a little bit offset, but ultimately I want to remove that in its entirety anyway. And you can see some remnants of the power lines that got dropped in up here. It's not putting into account really what we did on that other layer with the healing brush. But those are easy things to remove. So I would go back to that other layer where we were using the healing brush, and you could very easily start to heal out those other kind of little indiscrepancies that got dropped in. Okay, and again, eventually I would want to remove the rest of that phone line coming across down there as well. Okay, but if we hit Control-H once again, we can see we still have our selection. I want to make sure I still have that selection because I'm going to paste that power line back into it by hitting Control-V. If you don't have your selection, if you've deselected it and you try to paste it back in, it might drop it somewhere else. Okay, so again, just the attempt to try and work non-destructively is always good, not just kind of another way that we could really achieve that. Okay, so we still have it right there on its own layer. Okay, all right, very cool. So now you kind of have a sense as to how content-aware fill works. Let's go ahead and demonstrate this on another example, kind of a different situation, if you will. All right, so here we have an image where you can see this appears to be perhaps the ocean or a lake, and the horizon line is really crooked. So the first thing I would probably want to do is take our crop tool here, and I want to go ahead and try and just rotate the image just a little bit to straighten out that horizon line. Now you can see as I did that, it's going to crop out part of the image here from whence we rotated it. And let's say you don't want to lose any of that information. Well, you could still come up here to the edges of this cropping feature here and bring it all the way out. But what you're going to see here is you're going to have some empty space that will be based off of just whatever background color that you have chosen right here. In this case, it happens to be black. But we can easily fill in that empty information using content-aware fill. So we'll go ahead and commit to that. Okay, and what I'll go ahead and do is grab my lasso tool. I'm going to make a selection around that area right there. And just as I did before, right-clicking, choosing fill, and I'll click OK. And you can see just what an excellent job it really does. And we'll fill that in as well. And ideally, for something like this, I would make sure you have the original image saved as a separate file, just in case you ever needed to go back to it. And then we have this side over here. And then we'll go ahead and fill that in as well. All right, very nice. You can see what a great job it does. It's a little bit off right here, but we could easily fix that with another healing tool later on. Same thing here with this lamppost. We could remove that as well using the same kind of process we did with the power line. I can make a selection. I would hit Control C to copy it just in case I want to bring it back. I would fill it in, content aware, and then hit Control V. That'll put it on a separate layer right there, and we have it right there. A little bit off right there, but again, we could use another healing tool to kind of clean that up right there. We could perhaps use the clone stamp or something like that. But overall, you can see what a great job it does. So this is how you can use the content-aware fill option here in Photoshop, and it's a great way to very quickly remove any distracting elements from an image.